right, welcome back to week 8 of the DSR channel. And this will be the last video I do on the August UA, which was for the Apocalyptic subclasses, which very strongly seem like they're going to be Dark Sun. In fact, the name of this one is straight out of Dark Sun lore. That's why it's called the Sorcerer-King, because the default lore, an area that you started in Dark Sun, in the Dark Sun campaign setting, was this place where there were 7 city-states, no nations. Like it's an apocalypse, so there's no nations, no kingdoms are left. They're all gone, and all that's left are these 7 city-states, and each one is ruled by this tyrannical ruler called a sorcerer king or queen. There were 5 sorcerer kings and 2 sorcerer queens, um, and they weren't sorcerers at all. So a little confusing. Sorcerers didn't exist in second edition. That came along later. What they were super powerful wizard scions. They were multi-class wizard scions, 20th level, actually 21st level epic characters, right? It's kind of hard to translate how multi-classing worked between second edition and 5th edition. So anyway, super powerful wizard scions, right? Those were the sorcerer kings and queens, and they had these devotees called Templars, and they were like based on clerics, but they just worshipped these sorcerer kings. And so in 4th edition, they changed it to be a warlock. And I think that fits a lot better. It fits the theme better. And because especially even in the lore and the novels of 2nd edition for Dark Sun, most Templars didn't like worship their Sorcerer King. They didn't like them. A lot of them, just feared them, and it's the only reason they did it. So there wasn't any worship to it, right? It was really more of just a pact. I get this power, and I'm going to do these things for you, which is exactly the descriptor for a warlock, right? That's how warlock pacts work, and that's the difference between warlock pacts and clerics who worship gods. So I like the change to being a warlock. I fully support that. I think the name is always going to be confusing because now we have a class called sorcerers, but these sorcerer kings and queens were not sorcerers, and that's going to be confusing. Also, this is it's like a mouthful. Sorcerer King Patron. You're a warlock, Sorcerer King Patron. I think they should just pick something else that's more, gender neutral, more generic, not specific to Dark Sun lore. Call it the Tyrant. You're a Tyrant Patron, or Monstrous Tyrant Patron, something like that. All right, the designer's notes. Warlocks who desire to command the battlefield and intimidate their enemies will find themselves right at home with the Sorcerer King Patron subclass. For this subclass, we wanted to explore what it would be like to draw eldritch power from a tyrannical figure, and we leaned heavily into aspects of control and fear, which I think they nailed that, and which was perfectly the flavor of the Templars. Like our other Warlock subclasses, the Sorcerer King Patron subclass provides the Warlock with a handful of spells that are always prepared. There are some strong damage-dealing spells on the subclasses list, but there are also several tactical spells allowing the Warlock to cleverly manipulate the battlefield for their benefit. And as you might expect, the Warlock interacts a bunch with the frightened condition. Between spells and subclass features, this Warlock has myriad ways of terrifying a foe, and at higher levels, frightened creatures automatically fail saving throws against this Warlock's magical commands. And here's the intro flavor text for the subclass. Sorcerer King Patron, herald tyrannical might of monstrous rulers. Your pact draws from the power of a monstrous tyrannical force akin to a demigod or an overwhelmingly powerful magic user. Through your pact, you herald this tyrant's interest in the world, channeling their influence and mind-bending psionic power, which I think nails the flavor of these Templars. Now, Dark Sun is a world where everybody is struggling to survive, and most Templars didn't become Templars of their Sorcerer King because they liked them. It was a way to survive. I mean, a lot of people are just fighting for water and would kill other people for water because when you're super desperate for water, you do desperate things, right? So that just because you're a Templar or a Warlock of the Sorcerer King Patron doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're evil any more than it means like if you were a Warlock of the Fiend Patron. That doesn't mean you're evil either. You made a pact, and Warlocks, I think a big key core theme of Warlocks pacts is you made a pact that you needed to for survival, not because you wanted to, perhaps, right? Like Will from Baldur's Gate 3, right? Will didn't like his Fiend Patron, and he didn't like what she stood for, but he needed power in order to do good in the world and help people, and so that's the way he got power, was through that pact. That's basically the general Templars of Dark Sun, which is this Warlock subclass. So it doesn't mean you're evil. And I think as a player character, you guys are the exceptions. You're the heroes of the stories. So I think you should definitely be one of those Templars who is very much like Will from Baldur's Gate 3. You did this because you needed the power. First you did it to survive, then you started using it to help others, which you can do. And there are stories of Templars helping others. In fact, there's a story about how how a Templar was one of the people who started the Veiled Alliance. The Veiled Alliance in the lore are the only real significant force standing up to the Sorcerer Kings. So, and that was started by a Templar. All right, level 3. So this is in some ways, the same ability every Warlock gets at level 3, which is you have this list of spells you get first through fifth level, and they're always prepared, okay? So those spells are Command, Compelled Duel, Hold Person, Mind Spike, Wrathful Smite at level 3. Interesting here is you got 3 first level spells, which is not standard. Usually it's 2 first level spells, 2 second level spells. And so they got 1 extra spell, but it's Compelled Duel, which is garbage and makes no sense for this character, right? I think they put it on there for kind of to try to use it, or there is a small component of control to it, in that if you cast it on somebody, they can't move more than 30 feet away. But it's a terrible control spell. It is a taunting spell for tanks, and even then, it's not great. Paladins get this on their spell list, and I'm still would not spend my spell slots on a paladin tank trying to use this. I would get the protection fighting style. So it's a garbage spell, and it doesn't really make sense on this character, and it doesn't fit any kind of control mechanical theme. So I'd take it off. Level 5, Fear and Sending. Level 7, Compulsion and Staggering Smite. Level 9, Dominate Person, Synaptic Static. And I want to go back to Psionic Casting, which is this kind of like a fairly significant feature embedded in this feature, which I think they shouldn't have done, because it's significant, but yet it's kind of buried in a feature that every Warlock subclass gets, and so it increases the chance that people might just breeze right over that. But I get why they embedded it. It's because it only applies to these spells, these 10, 11 spells, nothing else. What it does is it means you can cast a spell without verbal or material components, except material components that are consumed by the spell or have a cost specified in the spell. Thematically, this doesn't make sense. I think they did it because psionics is pervasive in Dark Sun, but specifically, Templars were the least likely to be psionic or have psionics, and that's because the Sorcerer Kings and Queens were very jealous of their power, and they did not want they didn't want anybody else having power, right? They tried to hunt down and kill all druids. They try to suppress clerics. They try to kill every wizard, defiler, preserver, doesn't matter. They try to kill them all off, and they don't want their Templars having psionic powers because they want their Templars to only have powers that they grant them, which they can immediately take away. There's a lot of stories where they just say, nope, I'm not giving you those powers anymore. And right in the moment, right? If they start opposing them, they could immediately say, you don't have any more magic powers, more spells, and you're, and all they can then, all that's left is their, whatever martial ability they have, which wasn't a lot. So of any Dark Sun themed subclass, it makes the least sense to put a psionic casting ability feature on them for this subclass specifically. Now it does make sense that they put Wrathful Smite and Synaptic Static on them, or sorry, Wrathful Smite and Staggering Smite, because there was this martial concept to the Templars. The Templars in Dark Sun served as politicians, bureaucrats, judges, like the legislation and police force, and officers in an army. So they did have a level of martial training, and they did use their spells to augment their martial ability. So that's exactly what smite spells are for, and those are 2 perfect smite spells for a tyrannical, domineering type character, right? So I would, but they don't have any other features supporting a martial type role. I mean, even clerics at level 1 can have heavy armor training, shields, and martial weapon proficiency. Druids at level 1 can have training in medium armor, shields, and all martial weapons. And you're a warlock, you've got nothing else supporting this. You got light armor training, no shield training, no weapon proficiency, no martial weapon proficiency. It's just your simple weapon proficiencies. So it's cool that they've got these smite spells, but you got nothing else to back that up. You should not be on the front line with this kind of combination. So what I would do is remove psionic casting. It doesn't make sense here, and I don't think it's really doing much for you anyway, right? You're not trying to be the face of the party per se, right? You're domineering, you're intimidating. A lot of the times, you don't care that people know that you're casting spells. You want them to know because you want them to be intimidated. Um, and so I would remove psionic casting. I would remove compelled duel, and I would give them medium armor training, shield training, and martial weapon proficiency at level 3, right at this level. That's what I would do. And then you've got kind of this package that helps support you using smite spells, you having in an aspect of being a martial character, which is very different from all the other warlocks. As of right now, there are no warlock subclasses that give you that medium armor training. I mean, there's the Hex Blade from 2014, but that one hasn't been reprinted, and so it's still kind of in this weird, you know, you can use it, but it's not great kind of place. So there is no subclass yet for 2024 that gives you medium armor training and shield training. And by the way, I don't think they should limit it to one subclass. That made it too much of this. Well, I'm going to choose that one subclass if I want to be a martial. So give it to this guy, to this subclass, the Templars, Sorcerer-King patrons, to support those smite spells they've got, which all make sense. And then you have a package that's good. Next level 3 ability feature, Tyrant's Herald. You gain the following benefits. Intimidating Presence. You gain proficiency in the intimidation skill if you don't already have it. You also have expertise in intimidation. Great. Very thematic. Voice of Tyranny. You can cast command as a bonus action without expending a spell slot. You can do so a number of times equal to your charisma modifier, minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So first up, intimidating presence I think is great. It would be just a little better, a little more player friendly if it had said something like, you know, if you already are proficient in the intimidation skill, you can choose a different skill, and if you already have expertise in intimidation, you can choose a different skill. Just to make this a little more player friendly. Voice of Tyranny. This one, the command spell, is one of those interesting spells. If you cast it at level 1, it's not good. Which I know. I think a lot of people are saying, "Wow, command's a great spell." It is situational. When you upcast it, it's a great spell. If you don't upcast it, it's a bad spell. And that's because what you're doing, if you cast it at level 1, is you are trading your action, a spell slot, for the chance that you might take away one enemy's turn. And that's a bad trade-off, right? You probably have they probably have a 50 to 60% chance to save against your spell. And if they do, that means you spent your action and spell slot to do nothing. Okay. The reason why it becomes a great spell when you start upcasting it is it targets one more target for every spell slot you increase it. So at level 2 now, if you cast it at level 2, you now get the same effect on 2 creatures, right? Which is okay. So it's okay cast at level 2. Casting at level 3, a third level spell slot and higher is when it starts to get great, because now you have a much higher chance that at least one or two of them are going to fail to save, but you want as many as possible, right? So if you cast with a 5th level spell slot, which is what you would get as a warlock when you're 9th level, it's great because there's quite a good chance that 3 or 4 of them are going to fail their saves. And then you've taken away 3 or 4 turns from the enemy's side, and you've only spent one spell slot and your action. So that's a great trade-off, right, between the two sides. At level 1, it's not great. It's not even worth it. If if this took your action, I would say this is a bad feature. But the fact that they said they moved it to your bonus action without expending a spell slot, which means it's a level 1 always, makes it actually pretty good. So this is a pretty good feature because it's your bonus action. So you can still use your action for something else, whether it's casting a big spell, shooting Eldritch Blast, attacking with a weapon, and then bonus action, cast a level 1 command to maybe take away one turn from one enemy. That's a decent use. That's a good use of your bonus action. So solid. Decisive Edict. Your patron's power surges through you, allowing you to rally your allies and subjugate your enemies. When you cast a spell using a packed magic spell slot, you can cause a profane power to erupt in a 30-foot emanation originating from you. For each creature you can see in the emanation, choose one of the following effects. Martial. The creature has advantage on attack rolls until the end of its next turn. Oppress. The creature must succeed on a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC or have the frightened condition until the end of its next turn. Once you use this feature, you can't do so again until you finish a short or long rest. You also regain use of this feature when you use Magical Cunning. So this one's interesting. It's a new and unique feature, which I think a lot of people like, or a lot of people who've been playing the game a lot like. but I don't like this. It's kind of the worst possible combination of high value, short duration, very limited use that results in triggering that weird human, commonality, psychological commonality of resource hoarding. So I think many players will struggle to use this. They'll take this class, they'll think that that's a cool ability, and then they'll never use it because they want to save it because they only get to do it once per short rest. They're going to keep saving it until they're at the boss fight or whatever the big fight for the day is, right? And if that doesn't happen, and even then they're like, is this it? Is this the boss fight? I don't know. Is there one after this? Is there a worse one after this? I think a lot of times players are going to end up not using it because they keep resource hoarding this. Um, and so what I would actually like to see is for them to reduce its power, like probably just get rid of Marshall because that is a weird support feature on a class that otherwise class and subclass that otherwise has no support capability. And it's yeah, it's just weird to do that, and it kind of shows up in the middle of your progression as this subclass, and it only lasts one round. So I would get rid of that part of it, leave just the oppress, and I would get rid of the separate resource usage for this, and just leave it as whenever you cast a spell using a packed spell slot, and it just always goes off whenever you do that. Then you don't have to remember that it has its own resource. You don't have to remember that it recharges differently. You don't have to remember to mark it off at a different place on your character sheet. And it just always happens. It gives you just kind of this interesting incentive to just use your packed spell slots. And the packed spell slots already have this problem with resource hoarding, where players kind of like struggle to use it because they only have a couple. For most, for more than half of their levels as a warlock, they only have two um, or less. So there's already a problem with resource hoarding of the pack spell slots. I would like to see this little bit of encouragement to just use your pack spell slots more. And I think that would be cool because the oppress feature is very thematic for this character, very mechanically thematic for what you're creating here. Is this you're adding another serving of control on top of the warlock's control abilities, and I already rate warlocks as A level, A ranked controller, so you're adding another helping on top of that, and let's just lean into that, right? That's kind of why the party, that's what the party wants you for. They want you for control. Let's just lean into that and make this all easier to use and make more sense and trigger resource hoarding less. Level 10, Vindictive Rebuke. You learn to rebuff those who challenge you or the might of your patron. When an enemy hits you with an attack roll, you can take a reaction to force the enemy to reroll the d20. The enemy must use the new roll. If this reaction turns the attack roll into a miss, the triggering creature takes psychic damage equal to your warlock level. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your charisma modifier, minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Um, so on the subclass as it currently is, I think this is terrible because you are not a frontliner. You're not a marshal. You do not want to be anywhere where you're getting targeted. So you might trigger this when you're way back on the back row and you get hit by a ranged attack, and you can trigger this. Reaction only abilities that are reactions to only when you get hit are usually feel bads unless you're a frontliner or a tank. Are usually feel bads because you're trying not to get hit anyway. So first you feel bad, like, oh, I got hit and I was trying not to get hit, and maybe my concentration is now at risk. And then you're going to try to use this, and if it doesn't cause the attack roll to miss, which when I let players use silvery barbs in my games, which the more I think about it, I love silvery barbs for my players because it reduces the chances they're going to cast shield, which I hate the shield spell. And so that's the same effect here. You're going to cause them to re-roll the d20, right? It's basically the same effect as using silvery barbs that way. Most of the time, the attack still hits. Like 60% of the time, the attack still hits. So most of the time, this is going to be a feel bad, right? And you don't have the martial package to want to be on the front line anyway. Now, if they make those changes I suggested at third level, so you've got the armor training, martial weapon proficiency, then this makes more sense. I would still change this though and say that part about taking the psychic damage, I would remove the restriction, remove the condition. Just say whether the attack hits or misses, they take the psychic damage equal to your warlock level. So even if the attack still hits, you're still dealing damage. You're still punishing them for hitting you. And then you don't have this feel bad moment of you expended this feature and it did absolutely nothing, which is what's going to happen most of the time. So, and I would even support some sort of like they re-roll the d20 and have a penalty on top of that, a penalty to the roll. You know, kind of like the opposite of the fighter's indomitable, where they add their fighter level to the re-roll, so that you don't have those feel bad moments of I used this and still failed. I don't know that I'd add the subtract the warlock level from the re-roll, but some sort of like maybe subtract your charisma modifier from the re-roll. That would be a lot cooler. Overall, this is a weak ability that doesn't make sense on the subclass without some significant changes. Level 14, Absolute Tyranny. By the way, cool name. Very thematic name. Nailed it. You wield your patron's tyrannical might with absolute conviction. Whenever you cast command, you can target one additional creature within the spell's range. Additionally, a creature frightened by you automatically fails its saving throw against any command you cast. So, flavor-wise, perfect. Power-wise, very strong. Game design, I don't like it. This is kind of similar to the problems with those subclasses on the Scion, where it's just like you have one spell and we're just going to hit that button over and over and over and over again. And they're giving you more features to trigger you to cast it, just do that one spell. And you've been doing that one spell since level 3, right? You got command at level 3, you're using it as your bonus action, and now they're just giving you your level 14 ability, which is just cast command more. Now, if you're gonna play this character for a year or 2, how long is it going to be before you're tired of casting command and you wish you were doing anything else? I mean, it's just going to be boring. Um, and auto fail on the saving throw if they're frightened. That one's a little bit too swingy. And here's what I mean by that. The frightened condition at your level, your tier 3, approaching tier 4 of gameplay, more and more creatures are going to be immune to the frightened condition or have resistance to the frightened condition. So you're going to have a hard time landing a frightened condition on them. But once you do, they're screwed. Okay, because once with that automatic fail, once you land the frightened condition, the fight's basically over because you can just command and make them waste every turn unless they have legendary resistances. Just make them waste every turn until the fight's over. So it's a little bit too much like hard to use. But once you land it, boom, I win. It's like a hard to use I win button. Which is going to mean there's going to be a lot of. I mean, I think it's going to be feel bad on both sides. I think the first time you land this, it's going to be like that's amazing, but pretty soon it's going to get boring. Like that's my only strategy. I'm going to try to frighten and then I'm going to keep trying to frighten until it lands, and then I'm going to do this, and then the fight's over. So I think, yeah, I think players at first this will be exciting, and I think theoretically, think about it in your head. You're like, ooh, theory crafting, that sounds cool. I think when you actually play it, it'll be exciting. It'll be disappointing at first because you're going to keep trying to frighten and it's going to keep failing, and then you're going to finally land it, and then that'll be exciting, but only a few times because after a little bit of time, it's going to feel too much like, well, now the fight's over. Like I just won and I won the fight the same way as last time and the last time and the last time. So I think they need to tweak this design a little bit. I think they should do something like, first of all, add a clause that says no creature can have advantage against your saves versus the frightened condition for any warlock spell or feature. So they can't have advantage against your frightened spells or effects. So whether it's for magic resistance or some kind of feature that says that they have, a strong will and things like that that give them advantage on saves versus frightened, all of those are nullified. They can't have advantage on saves against your frightened so that you can land it a little bit more. That's not going to help versus creatures that are immune. And so maybe do something about the immune. I don't know. I'll have to, you'd have to do a little bit more analysis, but at least say they can't have advantage against those saves. And then once they are frightened, I wouldn't cause an automatic fail on the saving throw versus command. I would say give them disadvantage on the saving throw versus command. So then it's going to be a little more steady. You're going to be able to use it more often. And even though you landed frightened, there's still a chance that the fight isn't over. So there's still this thrill of keep fighting, keep trying. And it's going to land, it's just going to function more often, but still not be a game over kind of effect. I would do that, and I would probably somewhere between level 10 and 14 do something where they could, maybe the level 10 ability, give them an alternate use for that. So they still use the same charge of the level 10 ability. This one, have that whole section like I described, make the changes for the rebuke and the reaction effect, and say alternately you can expend one of these uses to cast any spell from your Sorcerer-King spell list without expending a spell slot, so that you have another way to cast your fear spell, the staggering smite spell, wrathful smite spell, to cast all of those spells without using your pack spell slot, because those are so precious. You only have a couple. You can recharge them with magical cunning. They recharge on a short rest, which you can't always get. So give them just a little bit more ability to cast those other fear spells and make you feel a little bit better about casting the spells that don't upcast. Overall, I think this is pretty good. And if they printed it as is, I think it would be okay. I think it would be a little. I think there would be a lot of disappointments. A lot of players forgetting to use their abilities and forgetting how they work. And I think that they would also end up playing this and feel like, kind of, what was the point? Because you're adding control features on top of a strong control class. And yes, I think that this would make the bonus action command and then the 14th level enhancement to command. I think this would make this a, you would go from like the Warlock base class is an A tier controller. I think that's easily A plus controller with those additional features from the subclass, or maybe S tier controller. So you're now an S tier controller. But you're going to still basically play the same as any other Warlock, where you're a controller and you're going to do control things, and you're also going to Eldritch Blast, or maybe you're going to go Pact of the Blade and fight with your weapon. You're still going to play the same. So it's not really adding any different dimension than you already had. It's just doubling down on the dimension you already had. So I'd like to see them fix a few things, and they added in some confusing abilities that don't really mesh with the mechanical package. It don't mesh with the lore of this character. So I hope that they make those tweaks and make this a little more differentiated, make it a little more interesting. But if they change nothing, it's not terrible. I think it'll be kind of fall somewhere in the middle of all the Warlock subclasses. It'd be kind of like a, cool to try once and probably, never play again type of class. So, all right. Thanks for watching. Tomorrow we get back to skirmishers, weapon tactics, and I also want to start talking about ability checks, advice on ability checks for DMs. So we'll get back to all of that tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.